You know, we talk a lot about in our prophetic ministry fleeing to the wilderness or fleeing to the desert or the mountains, and we get the idea that like look in Matthew 24 when Jesus is talking prophetically here. He says when in verse 15 he says when you see the abomination of desolation standing, spoken of by the prophet Daniel, okay, standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, okay? And so he wants us to understand that, right? And he says, then, when you see that, the abomination of desolation, he says, let those in Judea flee to the mountains, and let him who is on the housetop not come down and go into the house to take anything. And alas, let whom is in the field not turn back to get his overcoat. And alas for the women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing babies in those days. Pray that your flight may not be in winter on a Sabbath. For then there shall be great tribulation, such as not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be again. And if those days had not been shortened, no human being would endure and survive. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. Okay, so he's saying in this, when you see the abomination of desolation, he says, let those who are in Judea, he's talking about southern Israel, flee to the mountains. Okay? And we have here on the timeline, we have the abomination of desolation right here. And the reason we put it there is because in Daniel 12:11, he says, from the time that the continual burnt offering is taken away, which we know is in the midst of the week, here's the week, right? There's your 7 years. Right? That many people call Daniel's 70th week. Well, I'll prove it to you it isn't. From the time the continual burnt offering is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Okay, so we have the abomination of desolation right there. And in Matthew 24, he said, though when you see the abomination of desolation, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, correct? According to the timeline, that's the way we have it, okay? Now, we're going to come back in just a minute to this, but let's read another account of fleeing to the wilderness. In Revelation chapter 12, you have this. And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and with a crown like garland of 12 stars on her head. This is the Amplified Bible. And she was pregnant, and she cried out in her birth pangs in the anguish of her delivery. And then another ominous sign was seen in heaven. Behold, a huge fiery red dragon, with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 kingly crowns upon his heads. His tail swept across the sky and dragged down 1/3 of the stars and flung them to the earth. And the dragon stationed himself in front of the woman that he might devour the child as soon as she brought it forth. And she brought forth a man-child, one who is destined to shepherd and rule all nations with an iron staff. And her child was caught up to God and to his throne. And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a retreat prepared by God, where she's fed and kept safe for 1,260 days. Okay, well, we always thought, well, that's the same thing as Matthew 24. Those who are in Judea, let them flee to the mountains when you see the abomination of desolation. But when you put the abomination of desolation here, There's not 1,260 days left, right? And what happens is, most people put the abomination of desolation really here, okay? When you see, from the time the continual burnt offering is taken away and the abomination of desolation, people thinking that that's when Satan goes into the temple and declares he's God. But I would say that is not that. That is an abomination, but it's not the pinnacle of abominations. So you can see where the woman, right, the man-child is caught up, right, and the woman flees to the wilderness, okay? So the woman isn't Israel. The woman is the church. The man-child, they're the overcomers of the church. And those in Judea flee to the mountains then. It's two different people. These that flee to the mountains, that's the Jews who have been sealed back here. We'll get into that another time, right? But when you see the abomination of desolation, Matthew 24, verse 16, let those in Judea flee to the mountains. The woman down here, she flees to the wilderness. It's two different people. These are Gentile Christians, and these are Jews at that time.